Last time, Plastic Fantastic, how Luton Town upset the odds in the top tier last time around.
And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans set about the futile task of agreeing who is the greatest team of all time. Sometimes, like David Pleat defying the laws of biomechanics to celebrate survival, greatness is obvious. Other times, like when your manager stands in the pouring rain under an umbrella, it's a different story altogether. My name's Graham Dunn. I'm on a mission to crowbar in as many Oxford United references as possible. And joining me as ever is a man whose grip of the data is so strong, he makes Cambridge Analytica look like an Isthmian League outfit. It's Jamie Rooney. Hi, Jamie.
Graham, hi. Hello again. I'm feeling nostalgic from last week's episode with Mark. He started, I don't know if you picked up on it, but he talked about Shoot magazine, and it just kind of took me back to my childhood days. And you know, getting Shoot magazine was like the pinnacle of, you know, being connected with what's going on in the Football League. And it's around about this time of the year that I'll probably just be completing my league ladders. I'll have all the
league ladders. It has to be the league ladders.
And that teaser, because you get like a division every month through the summer. So it's a brilliant bit of marketing from Shoot to guarantee that you're going to still be buying it through the off season. And you get to early August, mid-August, and you've got your league ladders and you're ready to go. And then you move your league ladders around. And week 2, it's a load of moving around. Then week 3, it's a little bit more moving around. And then week 4, you're losing a couple of teams. You know, Oxford United are falling down the back of the sofa. Yeah, it really took me back just hearing the reference Shoot magazine.
Oh, that was so good. What I used to do, before the season, I'd set them out with my predictions, which obviously then you would kind of adjust for when the games happen. And about midway through the season, in a bored, wet holiday day, I would sit there and I would just order them in my team of most hated. And so whichever league would... That's the kind of child and non-positive person I am. This is our second pod of the season, and we are doing a mix of sort of deep dives into great teams and fans of that team, and broader episodes where we try to look at a couple of teams or more from with a bit of a distance or a bit more distance. So as Jamie said, last week we had Mark Griffiths, the brilliant Mark Griffiths from the Final Whistle podcast and the voice you'll know for the Welcome to Wrexham Disney documentary to look at Wrexham. That is an absolute belter if you haven't listened already. And for any marketers in the room, here comes the call to action. You can subscribe to the podcast. You could literally press subscribe now and do it. You won't regret it, and then you'll have a shiny new pod ready to play every Thursday. As well as that, you'll be able to access all our previous podcasts, which include a deep dive into Harry Redknapp's Portsmouth with Pompey fan Jamie Wilson, which was so good. We have asked Jamie back on this week. Hi, Jamie.
Hello, great to be back. Good to be here again. Feels like only last week we were talking.
And obviously we can't talk about Portsmouth again. There's only one great Portsmouth team, surely.
You're pretty much right there, yeah. No, I'm happy. I'm delighted to talk about something different for a change.
Before we get into the main meat of the podcast this week, we're doing this on the eve of the season. In fact, so this is where the strange space-time continuum thing happens, where we're recording this before the first game of the English League season, yet this will go out after the first game of the English Football League season, but before the first game of the English Premier League season. So I don't quite know where we are, because we are all excited about it, and many people will be in the same position of excitement that we're in next week at the same time. So opening day of the season, that is it's not quite as complex as I made out there, but
it's always extremely clear, Graham. We won't ask you to repeat that again, though.
Opening days of the season, any high points or low points stand out to you, Jamie? Jamie from Portsmouth, I should say first.
Jamie
Yeah,
from
you need to
Portsmouth.
get the terminology right today.
Obviously, I've got
No lazy first names.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. I'm trying to avoid this, but I think I ought to probably mention it. Yeah, from my Portsmouth side, there's a game that always sticks in my head from the opening day, and that was the first game that we played in the Premier League in 2003-2004 season. And I remember it for a couple of reasons. One, it was the first game in the Premier League. Two, I had the rare chance to speak on Talk Sport at the time, and had the rare privilege of speaking to Alan Brazil and Alvin Martin before the game. For some reason, I applied to be the Premier League fan, and I don't know how, through sheer luck, I got picked. So a nerve-wracking time was held the day before that game, where I was speaking to those two guys about Portsmouth's chances. But I remember what I said. I remember they sort of said, "What's the most important game of the season for you? Is it the Southampton game? Is there?" I said, to be honest, I think the first game is really, really important for us. I think if we get a win there, it sets up the momentum, and we'll be okay. And we did, and it was I still remember the atmosphere was fantastic. We won it 2-1. Teddy Sheringham, Patrick Berger scored. Gareth Barry got a late one back in return, and we won the game, and we stayed up that season. So that's a game that really sticks in my mind, and I remember it vividly being the first game of the season for those reasons.
It's weird. I assumed you would pick a game from 10 years ago where a team from Oxford headed down to Fratton Park and won 4-1. I don't know why you didn't choose that one.
Well, I thought I'd give you that. I thought I'd give you that one, Graham. Go on.
Do you know with that one? I was in an airport in Portugal. I genuinely didn't know the score, and this is sort of before kind of data roaming and Wi-Fi was a bit more ubiquitous. So I didn't know the score, and I know you don't believe this. I genuinely asked you from the airport. Oh, what's the score?
Did. Yeah, we'd just been absolutely hammered by your lot. And I get that little squeaky text come through. Oh, by the way, what was the score? Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm in an airport. I'll let it go.
Jamie, regular. Should I call you regular, Jamie? Podcast regular, Jamie. Anything from your side?
Well, as you know, Graham, when we record these things, I am fairly regular as well. We have to take many breaks, so that does make sense. I got a couple actually. So I'm going to go to the Premier League. I'm going to take us back to the early 1990s. We're going to Hillsborough, and Tottenham Hotspurs are travelling to play Sheffield Wednesday. Now the game ends in a 7-goal thriller, 4-3 to Tottenham, and Jurgen Klinsmann has just signed that summer, and he's come with this media frenzy because he's been labelled through certain antics and certain media outlets as a bit of a cheat, a very well used word in the English football vocab, and he's been labelled a bit of a cheat because he likes to go down a bit easy. Now, Graham, you play football with me. You probably know that I have no issues with the way that Jurgen Klinsmann goes down after horrendous tackles. I don't see any issues with it whatsoever, personally. But what I liked about Jurgen Klinsmann was his character. He was a fantastic character, and what he did was own the dive. So instead of playing up to the media and taking the bait, he absolutely owned it. And interestingly enough, Jamie non-regular, I say, you mentioned Teddy Sheringham. Apparently, Klinsmann credits Teddy Sheringham with that idea. So the Klinsmann dive that Jurgen Klinsmann owned on the Open Day of the Premier League, credits to Teddy Sheringham. It was Teddy Sheringham who dreamt up the idea in training the week before the game.
Fantastic. I didn't know that. No, that was cool. I do remember that vividly, though, didn't he? I remember him sort of ushering everybody around him and then launching into it. Fantastic.
I mean, it's great, really. But it is extraordinary, isn't it? Where, Klinsmann, we had painted him into this archetype, the ultimate enemy, that was it. And then it turns out that Klinsmann's got this really great sense of humour. He's really quite good. And as a manager, he's one of the most sort of free-flowing, entertaining Kevin Keegan-style managers as well. I find it difficult to remember that. Oh no, we used to hate Klinsmann, didn't we? That he's such much better when you don't know anyone.
Just to add to that, when Gary Lineker was interviewing him, sneaked up on him at an airport or something, didn't he? And tapped him on the shoulder for an autograph because he was autographing for kids, and he sort of took it from Lineker and signed it. A sort of smashing guy he was, and then sort of realised it was Lineker there, and that they had a laugh about it. But no, he always comes across as a really nice fella, doesn't he?
Jamie, what's the other one you got for us?
Well, I want to take us back to what's probably become, or definitely for me personally, our favourite footballing decade, which is the 1970s, where it just seems to be everything is going on in the football world in this decade. And I kind of want to draw attention to an opening day new league that kicked off where there were no extra games. So teams didn't have to worry about extra games, but a competition for all 92 English league teams. And all they had to do was do exactly what they were doing every single week. And they could potentially win up to a prize of £50,000 at the end of the year, which is around about $750,000 in today's money. Now, this was called the Ford Sporting League. Ford, as in the American Motor Company. Once again, we're looking at commercial opportunities in football. So they dreamt up this idea to put the fans at the centre of the game, where every single team in the league would be awarded a point for every home goal. They'd be awarded 2 points for every away goal. And then here's the catch. Bookings and sending offs was a new thing in the 1970-71 season. Sending offs was a rarity. Bookings was even more rarity. But it was happening. So they kind of want to clean up the image of the game. So the deterrent is for every yellow card, you get -5 points. For every red card, you get -10 points. So you've got this whole Ford Sporting League system going on, and most teams don't even blink an eye to it. It's something they're not interested in. They've got bigger priorities going on. But the Oldham Athletic coach at the time, Jimmy Fizzle, he catches on to this because there's a bit of a purse at the end of this. There's monthly prizes, but there's this big purse at the end of the season whereby if you are the leader of this table, you win the £50,000. So he starts playing quite attacking football, in particular in away games, Kevin Keegan-esque style to win games by just outscoring the opponent. But also he draws into his players to keep it clean. No bookings. So Oldham Athletic end up with just 4 bookings in the season. They pip Notts County and they win the Ford Sporting League. They get their money, and the catch that Ford had put in place, and this is where it comes back to the fans, was they had to invest something in the fans. They couldn't just spend the money on whatever they wanted in the club. They had to spend it on the fans. So Oldham Athletic, with the money, built a brand new stand. At Boundary Park, they built the Broadway stand, which was in place right up until 2008. It was a modern stand at the time. It was all-seater. I kind of have suspicions that Ford were very keen to promote their motor cars in the UK at that time and putting the fans front and centre. They're possibly making themselves look like the good guys. But I like the fact that they were trying to clean up the game by having this different system in place that had absolutely no impact on extra games, where most new innovations that come into football involve some extra games here or there.
It's quite something, isn't it? And this was presumably a 1-year experiment. I don't remember it ever happening. Well, I don't remember it happening at all, but I certainly don't remember it in my lifetime.
No, the system didn't take off. It was completely a failure, and it didn't carry on the following season.
As it should be. So we are talking about opening days, partly because last week's pod is Wrexham, and this week's pod, which includes Luton Town, we are highlighting it's a highly significant day, their first time back in a major league where they once were before. And in Luton Town's case, of course, they will at the weekend be playing their first game back in the well, I say back in the Premiership, their actual first game in the Premiership, but their first game in the top tier for 3 decades, more than 3 decades. We're going to take a look at their last time up in the top tier. It's an incredible story. You know, they were there for about 10 years, and across that decade, they touch a whole series of major things in that period, and stuff that goes on to become, remain live now. But when you think about Luton Town in the Premiership, I mean, they were there 10 years, but there's only one image that springs to my mind, and I'm sure it's the same for you. And that's David Pleat, isn't it? That's David Pleat running across the pitch at Maine Road. and we say running, it's an extraordinary movement he produces it across there, isn't it?
It really is quite something, isn't it? It's kind of like if you put a firework up a horse and lit it. That's kind of that it creates that kind of imagery for me, because it's kind of It's almost like a Messiah-like wave and gesture, isn't it? But it's the painful heat from behind that makes him kind of hop. It always makes me smile.
The horse thing's actually quite, because there is a semi-gallop. There are a couple of minutes where he's kind of galloping, and in those particular moments, he looks a little bit like Sammy Lee from when there's that Sammy Lee and Roy Hodgson picture of the two of them running off the bench that time, and also the sort of pace, because again, it feels like it's stopping. It feels like he doesn't quite know where he's going, but he continues it for much longer than you think before in order to get his bear hug from Brian Horton out.
It's a great. Because it's neither a run nor a dance nor a jump, is it? It's kind of. It is amazing. Nobody's ever really repeated that, have they? And particularly with those brown shoes that he's got on and that suit, that could have gone desperately wrong there, couldn't it? He could have gone face down with those. He would have had no grip on that. And those pitches back in those days weren't helpful for staying on your feet. What do they call it? The Jig of Joy, isn't it? Isn't that the iconic phrase for it?
Yes, the Jig of Joy. And the reason for it, of course, is that, that is the ultimate sort of crunch game. They are at Maine Road. They need... football has this incredible thing where it throws these things up, these clashes where, what would you know? What are the chances of these two teams who up against each other in a titanic struggle? And, of course, Man City only have to get a point. And they only have to get a point. It's 0-0. They're the home side. They're in the top division for 17 years. They're the established side. Luton are kind of the new kids on the block in that respect. No one would have backed them. And then obviously David Pleat brings on Raddy Antiche. He gets the winner. So you can sort of see why he lost him, why he got so excited.
What I really enjoy watching about it is that he doesn't know what to do with his jacket, because it's almost like he's got new presenter syndrome. He doesn't know what to do with his hand, and he's almost doing his jacket up because he's a gentleman, but then his jacket's flailing open. It's like, oh no, it's probably better flailing open. So he's fiddling with his hands, and his hands are up, they're down, and it really is a fantastic sight. And Jamie, you're right. I love the tan suit and the tan shoes. It's classic 80s, isn't it? You only have to watch an episode of Only Fools and Horses and you're going to see that on Derek Trotter.
Yeah, definitely. I always look at his shoes though and think maybe he should have gone a shade darker in the brown. There's a clash. There's a clash thing going on there. And what I love as well, because if you look at the Raddy Antiche celebration afterwards, it's got similarities there with Pleats. And what I also like about Raddy Antiche is he looks just like Leo Sayer as well. I don't know if you've really sort of picked that one up. I can never watch the Raddy Antiche goal without thinking of Leo Sayer.
What's great is I was really watching it ahead of the pod, and you have John Motson's commentary there, and we're talking 1983, isn't it? I think this happens.
That's right.
And at that stage, I don't know what year Murin and Tyson and Ardiles and Vida, they've been there a little bit by there, but after he scored, Motson comes out with this line of, has a Yugoslav saved Luton? And it's the shock that there would be someone from Yugoslavia. Of all things, of all the extraordinary things that could have been happening in football, that a Yugoslav has scored and has saved Luton. It's sort of a thing of it. But of course, it wasn't sort of commonplace to have that. And didn't I think Raddy Antiche, didn't he go on to manage someone quite big, I think? Not only did he manage Real Madrid, he's one of only two men, apparently, to have managed Real Madrid and Barcelona. So there you go.
Madrid, the two Madrid teams as well.
That Luton side has a number of, a couple of players who sort of go on to become more familiar. But actually, Brian Horton, I very much remember attached to Luton, and Brian Steen's playing for that team at that stage. There's also a couple of players who you'll both be familiar for, because of course, Mal Donaghy, who goes on to Man United. I think he has quite a good career at United. He's in the starting lineup of that team. And I had completely missed it. I don't know why, because he's very successful there. But Paul Walsh was in that Luton team. Yeah. So I had remembered him at Charlton. I had skipped it, but he was very successful. He was Young Player of the Year the following season at Luton. He was, I don't know how that part had escaped me, but two excellent players there.
I was looking up because obviously with the blue link here, he played 80 games scored 25 goals. And what was interesting about that Young Player of the Year award, do you know who he beat for that title? He beat young Ian Rush, John Barnes, to get that in there. So, and I think he went on to make 5 England caps. I'm not sure if they were all whilst he was at Luton, but he might have just been an 84 that he picked him up when he moved to Liverpool. But yeah, great player for them. And again, what was interesting, sort of just drawing the line, you mentioned Brian Stein. I'm sure we'll talk about him in a minute. I think there was a period where you had Walsh and Stein up front, probably 2 of the smallest strikers in the league that time, because I've stood next to Paul Walsh, and his stature isn't of the greatest. And I looked him up, and he's 5'7", and I think they measured him when he was on his tiptoes for that one. So you've got Paul Walsh. We're giving the benefit of the doubt at 5'7", and I became fascinated then by the heights of strikers. So I then looked at Brian Stein, because I thought he's got to be smaller than Walsh, and Brian Stein was 5'3". So I mean, and in some ways that's either good if you're a centre back pairing, or terrible and terrifying, because they're going to be. I mean, Walsh, having seen him up close and watched him at Fratton Park, he was a real fox in the box. He was a real kind of get it to his feet and twist and turn people inside out, quick feet. And Stein was very, very similar. So they must have been a nightmare to play against.
And we'll come on. We will come on to Luton's cup-winning side in a moment. But that Luton side is also, or Luton's spell in the top tier, was also quite established, quite well known because of their kind of innovation in terms of the artificial pitch and the membership scheme. Now, the artificial pitch, I don't think any of them. I think everyone called them plastic pitches in those days, didn't they? And QPR had obviously been the first to do it, but Luton did it in 1985, I think it is. It just became a massive talking point, especially for away teams there. I mean, it really dominated the whole conversation, the idea that these teams could play with a plastic pitch. And I do sort of recall bounce on them. It did look as though it did bounce a little more than your customary pitch.
It was horrendous, wasn't it? Let's be honest. In my illustrious Sunday League career, I've played on many a plastic pitch, but I think most of them were better than what I saw when I watched some of the highlights and clip. I mean, the bounce is awful if you look at it. Yeah, fair play to, and as I say, I'm sure you'll both go on to it. There's some fantastic players, but they also had some pretty big advantages in their favour that in those 10 years they were there, didn't they? The plastic pitch and banning away fans for quite a long period of time, and I mean that's quite handy, isn't it, for your home record?
What I particularly liked about that was how much it annoyed Liverpool. I mean, lots of people complained about it, but Liverpool seemed to take it as a personal affront. And Kenny Dalglish is a great legend, and he achieved many, many things in the game, but he sort of tried to create this narrative that Liverpool were more affected than any other team by it, or he got more upset about that pitch than anyone else I can ever remember.
Yes, I do recall that as well. They weren't the first, because QPR had done it quite a number of years before. So QPR had put their plastic pitch, which was even a lower quality than the one at Luton in the 81-82 season. And it had an immediate bounce effect, because they went all the way to the FA Cup final on the back of home draws. And they also won promotion from Division 2 into Division 1. QPR literally had a bounce effect. And then it really did kind of grow, because it wasn't just Luton. Oldham adopted it and were able to move from divisions and go to a couple of finals. Similar story to what we've got here with Luton. And also Preston North End, who were on the brink of financial ruin, looking like they could drop out of the league, albeit there with the election process that we've spoken about a number of times as we play. And Preston, one of the original members, was probably always going to be protected from the re-election process. And they bounced back as well. So not only was there a ridiculous bounce on the pitch, there was a ridiculous bounce off the pitch for these teams as well.
I get that they have a home advantage, but it has to sort of affect you the other way. I mean, it must be a disadvantage going back to grass. If you're playing 41 or how many games on grass, and one, or probably 40 once QPR have gone up as well, you have 2 games a season on a plastic pitch. You should be better on grass. So, it should it make that much difference?
It may not surprise you too much, but I did a few statistics on this. and I think there's an argument to say it did make a difference. Luton's home or unbeaten record before they put the pitch in the Division 1, the top tier, was around about 67%. And then they bounced into the 85-86 season with 86% unbeaten at home. They followed that up in the 86-87, 90% unbeaten at home. The following season, 85%. And then the 88-89, 74%. And then they're back to 89%. It's only in 1990-91 where the team is deteriorating that their home record does start falling back to what the levels were before the plastic pitch was put in play. So I think it did have a positive effect. But I think Jamie makes a really valid point. If you put a pitch in that Liverpool and other teams don't like, and you also take away all of their fans, you really are stuck in the car.
What I think they should be applauded for, because the other thing, of course, it brought was goalkeepers wearing tracksuit trousers, which until that point was purely in the domain of dodgy European team goalkeepers. We hadn't seen that kind of thing before. And, the only thing that can make a goalkeeper look less like he's really up for it, other than tracksuit trousers, is if he has a defender taking his goal kicks. It's like almost the next thing down from that, isn't it? But I have to, you have to applaud the innovation of it. That here we go, you're making every keeper have to wear tracksuit trousers. So Luton have that home advantage. The membership scheme on the banning of the away fans is an extraordinary thing as well. And of course that happens because Luton are subject to some of the worst football hooliganism we see after Millwall come to a cup tie. That goes, it's really horrible scenes there. So there's, the same with the plastic pitch. They were sort of ahead of their time in, you think with the pitches now, most of them are sort of half plastic or artificial anyway. They're sort of weaves. They're somewhere in between. Yep. There's this middle ground between what Luton were pioneering. And of course, there's grass pitches in the mid-80s were mud pitches, not quite as bad as the 70s, but still pretty grim. So that, they were ahead of the curve on that. And they're also, it's quite impressive from a technological perspective to introduce like electronic membership cards. My first season ticket was a book and you rip the stubs out every time. So, and the concept of doing that. And David Evans, who is the chairman, Luton's chairman at the time, he talked about, the idea that everyone, so technically it wasn't an away fans ban. It was that everyone should have a membership card, which is obviously goes on to be a wider issue and a challenge, and which we'll come on to in a minute, I guess. But the logic behind it is that if everyone did the same thing, then you could have away fans. It's not that they wouldn't let away fans in; they just wouldn't let anyone in without an accredited membership card. It's just that Luton were the only ones who had a membership scheme.
It seemed draconian, yet, as you say, you forward to now, and we've all got membership cards, really, haven't we? Because the season tickets that we used to get into the grounds, you wave at your turnstile and you go in. We used to have an old boy taking a ticket stub from you. It kind of came through in the end, as you say. It was quite innovative. David Evans, wasn't it? He was the chairman.
David
at the
Evans,
time.
yes.
And he wasn't he an MP as well? And
he
sort of helped
Tory MP.
Sort of push a few things through there. But when I was having a look at it, that they banned the away fans in the 86-87, and they had their plastic pitch in place, and it was their best finish of the of the decade, wasn't it? Unsurprisingly, perhaps.
You're absolutely right. They had those two things at the same time. I think Luton were barred from the FA Cup because the FA rules wouldn't allow. Yeah. Was it the League Cup they were?
They certainly beat Portsmouth on that plastic pitch. So I think 3-1 or something I remember at the time. I think it was a quarter final back in the day. But so I know that they certainly beat us in the FA Cup on that pitch.
They definitely, by the 1987-88 season, they do enter the League Cup and they do allow away fans into their ground. And they're notably in the semi-final, which unbelievably I was at, and it didn't go well for Oxford, but it went fantastically well for Luton. That League Cup side is really, I think, probably the epitome of that Luton team, actually. And it's interesting, I think if you asked anyone who's Luton's manager at the time, they would mostly say David Pleat. And obviously he'd left to join Tottenham a couple of years before. You then have Ray Harford takes over, but he doesn't take over immediately. Luton's best ever finish is under a chap called John Moore, who's manager for one season only, before he decides this isn't for him. One level, Luton's most successful manager. But I think you probably do think of that Ray Harford team and the team that goes to Wembley and beats Arsenal quite memorably in the final as probably the one which has the players you probably think more of as Luton legends. And by that stage, you've got alongside Brian Steen, who's a huge legend of the club. You have Ricky Hill, you have Steve Foster, you have Mick Harford, absolute legends of Luton's time there. So, I mean, Steve Foster, for example, I had forgotten that he played 5 years for Brighton. I assume he was in the cup final against Man United. I'd also forgotten he had 2 years at Oxford. But Steve Foster was, obviously Luton captain, a larger than life with that headband. He was an absolute dominant player.
He did play in the 83 Cup final, and he did wear a headband, and he had way more hair than he had in this League Cup final. I just want to go back to the siblings in football, actually, because what was really synonymous with that Luton Town team right through, and it's a credit to David Pleat and what they were doing at Luton, because they were bringing some youngsters through, and they were also very diverse, so a lot more diverse than many football teams at that particular moment, because we are talking low attendances, hooliganism is ripe, there are troubles around. But the Steen brothers, Brian and Mark Steen, this is the first time I can recall, maybe this is a challenge for you guys, this is the first time I can recall siblings playing in the same team together.
So it would have been around that time, wouldn't the Wallaces, would you have Danny, Rod and Ray? Three Wallaces about then.
Yeah, that's true.
Good shout.
The late 80s, yeah, Southampton. Of course, I've ruled out the Charltons playing for England. I meant club team.
Yeah. We'll ignore that one's too.
I can't think of any others. That was a good shout. That one.
I mean, Brian Steen is he's the absolute Luton legend out of the two. Mark Steen had an interesting sort of career. He never really thrived at Luton in the same way, and actually he had a sort of a slightly strangely nomadic career for a bit. He didn't thrive at Luton. He went to QPR for a bit. Did okay. He too played for Oxford, and we signed him. And he was absolutely fantastic for 6 months or so. Unbelievable skill and play. And then he sort of fell away, and it wasn't until he joined Stoke City under Lou Macari where suddenly he gets this. He really finds his mojo, and within a couple of years, Chelsea sign him for multi-millions, and he's back at the top end of it. But it took him a long way to get to the top of the football tree, I think.
He did, didn't he? I was looking at it because you sort of see Brian Steen played again. But when I was, you sort of see that he's played a long time for Luton. What was it, 77 to kind of 88 in his first period, and then sort of he came back again, didn't he, from 91 to 92? And you sort of, my memory as a kid was, as you say, that Brian and Mark at Luton, but really Mark was only there for a season and a half, 2 seasons, so played 40 odd games for them. Right. And they didn't really play as much together as I always thought that they did.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Brian Steen had an extraordinary run at the club, and Ricky Hill, I think, was the other dominant figure in that team. A really elegant and skillful footballer. Went on to play for England as well. Both play in the League Cup final in 1988, where Luton play Arsenal. It finishes 3-2 to Luton, and that's it was an extraordinary performance from Luton, wasn't it?
The last 20 minutes is fantastic. I remember watching that as a kid and clearly wanting Luton Town to win. And the last 20 minutes was just thrilling because you've seen the underdog hold off up until the 70th minute. Then the big boys come in, they get the 2 goals in quick, short time. And you think the dream is over for this small team in Hertfordshire. And then in the last 10 minutes, Danny Wilson pulls it back. And then you think you're going into added time. And then Steen pops up with his second of the game. It's a thrilling last 20 minutes. And on the back of that, I think I was a 14 or 15-year-old lad, massively into Subbuteo, I bought the Luton Town Subbuteo team because I love the kit and I was super excited that they won the League Cup. That became my home kit
Superb.
in my local Subbuteo League.
Love that. I mean, that is an amazing game, isn't it? When you watch that back, I'd forgotten. I think in some of the commentary I've read, the first 45 minutes is a bit of a dull affair, and then it all kicks off second half. What you've also got within that, isn't it? It's kind of that. It's that lovely cliche, isn't it? That their name was on the cup that day because Smith gives Arsenal a 2-1 lead with 15 odd minutes to go. Then Arsenal are all over them, aren't they? And you got Smith hits the bar. Dibble makes an amazing save, tips it onto the bar, and Martin Hayes misses it from about 1 yard and hits the post. And then you've got the Winterburn missing a penalty or Dibble saving it again. And then again, as you say, that quick fire Wilson and Steen at the end to take it to 3-2. So it was quite an amazing. And also what was really interesting, when you compare it to the teams of today, you've got, Andy Dibble had to come in and play, didn't he? Because Les Seeley was injured, and he played 6 games that season. I think I read, and he also had to, and Harford had to play, as in Ray Harford had to play. David Pleat had to come in. He played 1 game since October, and you had, Ricky Hill was struggling with injury as well, wasn't he? Their talismanic midfielder, and you sort of think like the strength and depth of Premier League teams these days, there's no way they would have played somebody in a cup final having had 1 game or whatever. It just wouldn't happen. And I quite like that, actually. I quite liked it. It felt more kind of real, doesn't it? It's like, well, Ricky Hill, I would imagine, probably hadn't trained at all for a few weeks, thrown into a cup final, and some of the challenges that are going on. I love that. The 2-footed tackles that go in and the ref gives a free kick. These days you borderline red for a few of those. So in terms of the highlights, it's a great highlights game to watch as a neutral on that one. Yeah, brilliant stuff.
I think in the 80s there was a whole series of these games where number 2 keepers or rookie keepers would come in and have a legendary performance in a sort of cup final. So obviously we had Tony Parks with Tottenham, and he had Nigel Spink with Villa. And then, in fact, slightly weirdly, I suppose, the yin and yang of it all is that Les Seeley, obviously, having been denied that cup final appearance with Luton, then when Jim Leighton gets, very, very cruelly dropped, Les Seeley comes in and handles that occasion remarkably well.
He was fantastic, and you got a firm sight of what Ferguson was. A ruthless operator. He'd taken Jim Leighton into that United team under his wing, from Aberdeen, drop in a keeper for a cup final replay, takes some balls, and his decision was confirmed because Les Seeley was a hero. And he, bless him, God rest his soul, he dined on that FA Cup victory for years and years. And at United, I can say every time he was there, he got an incredible reception. The United fans really took to Les Seeley.
And of course, up front, you had, the legendary Mick Harford, who is clearly an absolute legend for Luton. And that obviously is the high point. It kind of coming years, things start to unwind a little bit for Luton. Obviously, unrelated to the plastic pitch and the away fans ban, they do start to struggle. They are one of the smaller teams in there. I mean, I do find it quite entertaining that, I went to Kenilworth Road a few times in that era, and their ground didn't seem as out of place as it does now. And now it's, it seems like from a very different generation, which is why it's so brilliant to have it back in and to have Luton back in the Premier League. Part of me would love them to put a plastic pitch in there so we could have Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp complaining about it in the same way. I'd respect that even more. Before Luton go down, they do start having a few narrow escapes. Now, I'd forgotten, again, coming back to this narrative, that as far as I'm concerned, they only had 2 managers during this stage, and that was David Pleat and Ray Harford. But it's Jim Ryan is in charge of them for a couple of seasons. I don't know how this had passed me, but I had no sort of memory of it. And he actually manages to keep them up in quite challenging circumstances. Now, another game to draw some note about is we have seen Luton get a fantastic last day of the season survival win against Man City. They go right to the wire again in a game against Derby County, But by this stage, Mick Harford isn't playing for Luton, but he still has a role to play in that, doesn't he, Jamie?
Yes, he does. Well, what I like about Mick Harford, so he's Luton through and through, isn't he? I mean, he's still at the club now, isn't he? I think head of recruitment or something, as well as winning their League One championship as manager. I mean, a total hero. But as you say, the narrative here, so he's played for him for 6 years, banged in about 60 odd goals. Then he gets transferred out, doesn't he, to Derby. And Derby are already relegated, aren't they, at this point when they're playing Luton, if I recall. And Luton need to win it. And there's a free kick, and Mick Harford goes back to defend and unfortunately scores an own goal into the top corner past Peter Shilton. It's great because I think he came out a few years later and said that he did that deliberately. But if you watch the footage, I mean, it's a brilliantly done because it's if you change the colour of his shirt, you kind of put your hand over it, as I did. It's a great finish. But the way he nonchalantly walks away, he looks like a man who's very upset. He's just scored an own goal. Yeah, so it does make me laugh when I watch that. It's a brilliant anecdote to that season, really.
There's something just right, and you look at whether that's Dennis Law scoring for Man City against Man United, or these players coming back and in many cases haunting the opposition. Well, Mick Harford did it in style, and whether on purpose or not, he held out Luton, which is exactly what you'd want from a club legend. And he certainly was. He scored a hell of a lot of goals for Luton within a couple of spells. He manages, as you say, all-round club legend, and he was horrible to have to play against, I would imagine, as a defender. He was a real presence there.
He is your handful up front, isn't he? I mean, he is the epitome of, what is he, 6'3", strong, bullies you off the ball. And again, as a Luton fan, isn't it? I mean, for the guy to leave you and then score a goal that helps you stay up when he's playing for the opposition team. I mean, I'm not, are there statues built of Mick Harford, Kenilworth Road? Because there should be.
There definitely should be. The Luton era in the top tier finishes in the 91-92 season, doesn't it? And Luton, of course, was sort of cruelly denied having voted for the newly established Premier League, are then denied the chance of appearing in it. And then, it is a difficult few years that follow for Luton. Various administrations they suffer, as some people on this podcast are familiar with this issue of points deductions. Oxford have largely, throughout my time following, we have largely been at a similar level for large periods with Luton and have largely come off far worse than Luton, who are doing, so they beat us in the League Cup semi-final, and then we had a glorious moment briefly in the conference where we got out. So both Oxford and Luton slid down the league, and Luton obviously slid all the way down as well into the conference, and we had a glorious victory there, and then Luton just passed us by and made the way gloriously back up to the top. And I think it is an absolutely fantastic story to see them back there, I have to say. Luton fans have been through, some really, really difficult, dark times. To get that club back into the Premiership is just an amazing achievement, I think.
Yeah, it is fantastic. And I think, it's redemption for Luton. Having voted for the Premier League over 30 years ago, they now finally get the chance this weekend to play in the Premier League, which is fantastic. They deserve that. And getting back to the 87-88 team, which is kind of where we've narrowed the focus of greatness here. And I'm loving the volume of Oxford United references in this particular podcast. And
I've done well.
It's great to know that, you're at that semi-final at the I assume the Manor Ground in Kenilworth Road. What I'm a little bit unsure about is your memories of the two league games in the 87-88 season. As we're talking Oxford United, I just thought maybe it's worthwhile just kind of poking your recollection of the home and away game in the League Division 1 at that point.
I am struggling to remember the home game. I've got a feeling the away game is something like 7-4 or 7-2 or something crazy. I believe we might have actually gone into that game with we're playing 5 at the back as well. I think we attempted to tighten things up in in an unsuccessful moment. Yes,
the home game put you out of misery was, and again, an incredible scoreline. Was 5-2 to Luton Town. So in the league that season, Oxford United managed to score 6 goals against Luton Town, but they were still outscored 2-1.
Wow.
It's not good, is it? It's not good. I think I remember one of those games being over Christmas or over the post-Christmas period or over the New Year. I think the commentary had something about Oxford United's defence was still handing out Christmas presents in the classic. Oxford's Tommy Caton still appeared to believe it was Christmas and was still in benevolent mood. Yes. So we should have a think about ranking this Luton side. Before I do that, I should of course remind people who are new to the pod and myself who struggles to remember all the categories of our categories of greatness, which go from right at the top, all-time greatness, through true greats, to touch of greatness, which is our middle category, and then we have edge of greatness. Below that, we have blink of greats, and then we do have a bonus. Not great, but without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. Jamie, where are you landing on this one?
Yeah, this is a great story, and it's a great period because not only do Luton Town come into the top tier, they stay there, and they bring with them some things that the top tier hasn't seen previously. The plastic pitch is fantastic, and it definitely gave them advantage. The banning of away fans is an innovation. I just don't understand why that never caught on. But if we narrow the focus down to the 87-88 season, they've won the League Cup and they've beaten the mighty Arsenal. They finished 9th in the top tier, which is equal second, the highest finish, after finished 7th the previous year. They've also reached the semi-finals of the FA Cup and lost to Wimbledon, who would then go on and beat Liverpool in the final. And we shouldn't forget that this was a period of time where English teams weren't competing in European football. So Luton Town were denied a place into Europe by winning the League Cup. But that season, there was an innovation going on called the Full Members' Cup, and Luton Town actually got to the final of that and lost as well. So they've gone the distance almost in 3 cup competitions. They've secured a top 10 place in the league. So where I think this is a classic case of touch of greatness. I don't think it warrants anything higher than that. It could be the edge of greatness, but I'm going to stick with touch of greatness.
Pompey Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think when you look at the sort of 87, 88, 89 period, they're a great team really, and with a bit of luck, they'd have achieved more. I mean, they were runners up, weren't they, in the League Cup in 89 as well, losing 3-1 to Forest. And you've got Ricky Hill, you've got Mick Harford, Brian Steen. They were all on the edge of the England team as well. And I think if they'd have played for a bigger club, no disrespect, they'd have probably played a lot more England games. And I just like the fact that they, against all the odds, they won the League Cup there in '88. So I don't know. As you say, Jamie, it's between those two. I'm probably going to go edge of greatness for me. That's where I'm probably going to fall down. But I almost want to just add the caveat to it as well and just say I'm actually quite delighted Luton are in the Premier League, because it kind of gives teams like who myself and Graham support, it gives us hope, doesn't it? That the less fashionable teams can still get into the Premier League and ruffle a few feathers. So yeah, just with that, I will still give them the mantle of edge of greatness.
I mean, Luton are a team who I have a huge contradiction with, because they largely achieved, right down to signing Danny Wilson, who had a choice between signing between Luton and Oxford and chose Luton. So Luton always seemed to get the better of us. And so, I don't think at the time, especially with their plastic pitch and with the away fans ban, I don't think really until that game against Arsenal, I don't think I ever really fully appreciated what the achievements of what that team was doing when they were down there. And when I look back on it now, I sort of absolutely love that they did, kind of take maverick decision. They did, do difficult things. I mean, it takes some nerve to do some of the things they did, both sort of on off the pitch, and they did sort of thrive in upsetting the balance there. They were kind of the original underdogs in that league, and they managed to do that for sort of 10 years and get themselves really established in that position. And we can talk about the things they had in their favour, but there they are at Wembley. The odds are stacked against them. They're absolutely stacked against them in terms of the injuries to players. As Jamie, as you said, they're patched up. And they're doing it on the Wembley turf. They're doing it against Arsenal, one of the best teams of the lot. And, I think that takes some take. So I think that just pushes them up into the echelons of touch of greatness. So I say Luton Town, 87 to 89, touch of greatness. So we have one last bit of business to go through. We get back back into the hot tub time machine. It's always the hot tub time machine when South Coast Jamie is with us. The question of where to go back, if we could go back to one moment across that decade of Luton first time round in the top tier of the English leagues. Jamie, let's start with you. Where would you go back to?
I have two memories of Luton Town during this period that stick out in my head. The first one is a personal memory as a Man United fan. Big Ron Atkinson, went the first 10 league games with 10 wins in the 85-86 season. And the buzz was finally Manchester United are going to win a league championship after having not won since 1967, as it was at the time. And it was easy to see because they were playing attractive football. And the team that stopped United in their unbeaten run was Luton Town away. It was a 1-1 draw on game 11. And then it goes rapidly downhill from there. And I think we finished fourth or fifth, and Liverpool win again. And they're the greatest team. And the status quo has been resumed. But I do remember the League Cup final versus Arsenal. And I do remember being so excited watching it because it was thrilling. And Jamie references the missed penalty from Nigel Winterburn as well. I mean, that's just a wonderful moment because once again, you just think this dream is not going to happen, and it does. And the last 20 minutes was just an absolute roller coaster ride, and that stuck with me. And it kind of, as I mentioned, I went out and I bought a Luton Town Subbuteo set on the back of that, and got hours and hours of playing pleasure out of that. Until one of my rivals deliberately squashed one of my players. I think it was Mick Harford. I will go back to the League Cup final, 87-88, and watch Luton Town. The mighty Luton Town beat the unknown and relatively lower league Arsenal 3-2.
South Coast, Jamie, where are you going?
I think for thinking about this, there's kind of the obvious place to go, isn't there? I wasn't at that cup final. I'd have been there, but Jamie's taken that one. So I'm going to go for Mick Harford's deliberate own goal against Derby. And I want to go back there with the full knowledge. So I'm there and I know Harford, because he came out a couple of years later and said he did it deliberately. So I want to watch Harford the whole game. I want to see what positions he's taking up. I want to see how hard he's going in for those tackles. I want to see the reaction he has after he puts that ball in. Is it one of, does he shrug his shoulders? It's like, I was there defending the free kick. I went up for it. These things happen. Does he get a little whisper from one of his former colleagues as he's walking back? Does he give somebody a wink? I want to look out for all of this stuff. So I would go back there and I would just have my total focus on Mick Harford for 90 minutes before and after his deliberate own goal.
You'd be setting the Sky player cam on that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely would.
That's a great option. I obviously want to be there watching David Pleat defy the laws of biomechanics. It's just too good. I think absolutely extraordinary extraordinary moment. One will continue to. I said it on a previous podcast. You know, where is the statue of David Pleat in that position? There should be one. There should definitely be one. But so I would definitely. But the drama of that game as well, the great shock, and actually what it does is it heralds a great era for Luton. You know, Luton's best era, at least in the modern game, probably ever. You know, that I think that is that has to be the moment. So that's all we have time for this time. South Coast, Jamie, thank you for your time this week.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
And Jamie, thank you too for sharing your memories.
Thank you. And thanks again, Jamie. Absolutely wonderful to have you as a guest again.
Yes, indeed. Been great having you back on. We will return with another podcast. In the meantime, please review the podcast, like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. You can follow us on all the social media channels at By Far the Greatest FC. And you can follow myself at X on Said and Done, and Jamie on Couch Pundito. That's all we have time for. We will speak again soon.